In the heart of the Forbidden City, behind vermilion walls and golden roofs, a secret power operated in the shadows. These were not ministers or generals, but castrated men who served the emperor's household. Their influence would grow until it threatened the very dynasties they were meant to protect. The institution of eunuchs dates back to China's earliest dynasties. Originally, they were prisoners of war or criminals who were castrated as punishment. But as imperial courts grew more complex, their role evolved from mere servants to indispensable administrators. Eunuchs possessed a unique advantage: unrestricted access to the emperor's private quarters. While ministers could only approach during court sessions, eunuchs lived within the palace walls, attending to the emperor's most personal needs day and night. This proximity created opportunities for manipulation. Eunuchs controlled what information reached the emperor and what was suppressed. They became gatekeepers of imperial knowledge, filtering reality through their own interests. The Qin dynasty provides our first dramatic example. Zhao, chief eunuch to the first emperor, orchestrated a palace coup after the emperor's death. He forged an imperial decree, eliminated the rightful heir, and placed a puppet on the throne. Zhao's power grew until he literally held the emperor hostage. In a famous incident, he presented a deer to the court, but insisted it was a horse. When officials hesitated to contradict him, the emperor realized his own power had evaporated. The Han dynasty initially restricted eunuch power, but by the Eastern Han period, they had regained influence. Eunuchs formed powerful factions that rivaled those of the scholar officials, leading to violent conflicts within the palace. During the Tang dynasty, eunuchs achieved unprecedented military power. They commanded the elite Shen's army, making them not just political players, but military commanders who could decide the fate of emperors. In 835 CE, Emperor Wenzong attempted to purge eunuch power in what became known as the Sweet Dew Incident. The plot failed spectacularly when eunuchs discovered the plan and massacred hundreds of officials instead. The Song dynasty learned from these mistakes and implemented strict controls. Eunuchs were barred from political positions and military command. For a time, the eunuch problem seemed solved. But the Ming dynasty would witness the most extreme eunuch dominance in Chinese history. The Hongwu emperor had banned eunuchs from literacy, but his successors reversed this policy, creating educated administrators with political ambitions. The Ming established the Eastern Depot, a secret police force controlled entirely by eunuchs. They could arrest, interrogate, and execute anyone, including high officials, without judicial oversight. Wang Zhen became the first powerful Ming eunuch, advising the young Zhengtong emperor. In 1449, he convinced the emperor to personally lead a campaign against the Mongols, a disastrous decision that ended in capture at Tumu Fortress. The emperor's capture created a crisis that nearly toppled the dynasty. Wang Zhen died in the battle, but his legacy of eunuch military interference would haunt the Ming for generations. Liu Jin, known as the Standing Emperor, took eunuch corruption to new heights. He controlled all memorials to the emperor, demanding bribes for their delivery. His wealth reportedly included 250,000 taels of gold and 50 million taels of silver. Liu Jin created his own parallel government, issuing orders in the emperor's name. He even established a personal secret police that terrorized officials who opposed him. For 4 years, he effectively ruled China. His downfall came when a prince's rebellion exposed his excesses. Officials finally convinced the emperor of Liu Jin's treason. He was executed by slow slicing, a death of 1,000 cuts that lasted 3 days. Zhongxian represented the pinnacle of eunuch power. Illiterate but cunning, he rose through alliance with the emperor's wet nurse. Soon, he controlled the Eastern Depot and all palace appointments. Officials who opposed Wei formed the Donglin Party, advocating for reform. Wei responded with brutal purges. Hundreds of scholars were tortured, executed, or driven to suicide in what became known as the Donglin persecution. Zhongxian demanded something unprecedented: temples built in his honor across China. Officials were forced to worship him as a living god. His cult of personality surpassed even that of the emperor. When the Tianqi emperor died, Wei's protection vanished. The new emperor moved swiftly against him. Facing certain execution, Zhongxian hanged himself, but his corpse was still dismembered as punishment. But the damage was done. The Ming bureaucracy had been decimated by eunuch purges. Corruption was institutionalized. When peasant rebellions erupted decades later, the weakened state couldn't respond effectively. As Li Zicheng's rebel army approached Beijing in 1644, the last Ming emperor found himself betrayed by his eunuchs. They opened the city gates to the invaders, sealing the dynasty's fate. The Qing dynasty that followed implemented strict controls from the start. The Kangxi emperor limited eunuchs to 3,000, down from 100,000 in Ming times. They were barred from politics and closely monitored. But even the Qing couldn't completely eliminate eunuch influence. And Dihai, favorite of Empress Dowager Cixi, became powerful in the late 19th century. His public arrogance eventually led to his execution, but only after significant damage. The fundamental problem was structural. Eunuchs existed because emperors needed servants they could trust with access to their families, but this access created power that inevitably corrupted. Eunuchs also filled a vacuum. When emperors were weak, young, or disinterested, someone had to manage the palace, and by extension, the empire. Eunuchs stepped into this void, creating shadow governments. Their influence extended beyond politics. Eunuchs controlled the imperial workshops, managing enormous budgets. They supervised trade and tribute missions, skimming profits at every opportunity. Some eunuchs, like Zheng He, served China well. The great admiral led 7 voyages that expanded Chinese influence across the Indian Ocean. But he was the exception in a system that mostly produced corrupt operators. The psychological impact cannot be ignored. Castration created men with unique perspectives, often resentful of the society that had mutilated them. This resentment sometimes translated into ruthless ambition. Eunuchs also developed their own support networks. They adopted sons, often other eunuchs, and formed alliances across generations. These networks survived individual emperors and dynasties. When we examine fallen dynasties, we find eunuch fingerprints everywhere. They didn't act alone. Weak emperors, corrupt officials, and structural flaws all contributed, but eunuchs often accelerated the decline. The legacy continues in modern perceptions. In Chinese literature and drama, eunuchs are often portrayed as sinister figures, a cultural memory of real historical trauma. Their stories warn against concentrated, unaccountable power. What lessons does the eunuch problem offer about power? First, that access to leaders creates influence regardless of formal position. Second, that systems without checks inevitably corrupt. And third, that the most dangerous threats often come from within. The Forbidden City stands today as a museum, its shadows illuminated for tourists. But for centuries, those shadows hid a power that shaped and ultimately helped destroy imperial China. The eunuchs are gone, but their cautionary tale remains. From Zhao to Zhongxian, these men remind us that power seeks every available path. When formal institutions weaken, informal networks rise. The eunuch problem wasn't about castrated men, it was about how absolute power corrupts absolutely through whatever channels it can find.